It's Jay. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. Jay, Stongo, Gary 5, Jaho Jifkidos, Mvskoke Radio here on a wet Okmulgee day here. We're trying to play with some phones. Ms. Place, are you with us? I think we got things put together here. Michelle Place. Okay, first of all, let's get a quick ID on who you are and the organization you're working with there.
Sure. I'm Michelle Place, and I'm the Executive Director for the Tulsa Historical Society and Museum.
Okay, now we're going to get to the story of a stolen statue here in just a second, but for those folks who are not familiar with your society, can you give us a quick capsule of who you are?
Sure. Thank you for asking. We are located at 25th and Peoria, right in Midtown in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've been at this location when the property was acquired in 1997. It was an historic home that was going to be leveled and turned into condominiums. And so there were a group of Tulsans who had a dream of a permanent facility in which we could collect, preserve and present Tulsa's history. So we were able to open with a new museum wing and renovations to the building, the original home beginning in 2004 and fully opened by 2007.
Now, what is your mission? What's your place in the community?
So our admission, we are about stories of Tulsa. We're not about bricks and mortar. That's really the Preservation Commission. They handle all of those things. But what we want to do is to tell these incredible stories of those who have gone before us, not only about the oil industry, although that's certainly an important part of Tulsa, of our history, but there's so much more that has been achieved in our community. And what we really want to do is, number one, preserve those stories, but use them as examples of what can be achieved. Those who went before us dreamed really big dreams about parks and clean water and public safety and infrastructure. Of course, on a day like today with it so raining, retention ponds are certainly a part of our history. And so we want to tell all of Tulsa's stories, all of the marginalized communities, not just the oil man story.
That's wonderful to hear, since we always felt that Native American people, that this was Indian country. But
exactly.
Tulsa actually was founded by people from the Mvskoke Creek Nation who arrived here after the Trail of Tears. And Council Oak is still standing there proudly in the park downtown. What part of your, now, I presume you have collections there or you have exhibits? Is that the case?
We do. We have 7 annually rotating galleries. So we, they're on a schedule where, they don't all turn at the same time. So theoretically, there's something new for everyone to see. You can't say, I've been to the Historical Society, I've seen what they have. Well, we only have, as most museums of our size, we only have about 15% of our collection on exhibit at any one time. There are lots of reasons for that. Number one, there's so many stories to tell about Tulsa. But in best museum practices and our standards, you don't leave anything on exhibit permanently, because it needs to go back to storage and it needs to, quote, rest, if you will. Think about a textile, if that was hanging on a mannequin and the pressure that would be put on the shoulder seams, whether it was a uniform or um, a dress from the 1920s. And light, of course, is one of the most destructive elements. So we want to pack everything in acid-free boxes and envelopes, et cetera, because we want to preserve this history, these stories, for as long as we can. The other thing that we absolutely do is our exhibits are more thematic. So one of my favorites that we did several years ago was called Purchase to Pioneers, and that was the Louisiana Purchase, of course, moving on to the story of the forced removal and then those early pioneers who came and started our community. So that was a large exhibit, and it lasted for about a year.
The city of Tulsa is located in a spot where three reservations come together. Of course, the Mvskoke Creek, there is Cherokee Territory, and Osage. And have a wonderful basis for building a community, and Tulsa has such a varied history there. And of course, my particular interest is how those Native American peoples and cultures are represented in your facility.
Sure. Let me begin by saying not represented enough. We'll just start with that. We are situated in the Creek Nation, and we pay homage to that in a number of ways. I love one of the, it's a really large map. Hopefully you and your listeners have seen it before, but it shows all of the allotments of the Creek Nation. And so you can find where your current home or wherever you work and look at that and determine who had the original allotment. I spend a lot of my time now talking about the five tribes, why that's important. I give a history of it. It's a pretty new program that I've put together. And as I started doing the research, I realized I need to go back 30,000 years and talk about the civilizations that we certainly know about and how long that they have been on this continent, and then move towards the story of Indian Territory, and then with the DAWs and allotment system, et cetera, et cetera. And I talk about treaties that or broken or ignored, however you want to look at it. So I think now there is especially a quest, probably Killers of the Flower Moon with the Osage Nation, and that movie that's coming out is helping to raise an awareness about First Peoples, First Nations, and to learn about the story of Indian Territory. You know, so many people think they know Oklahoma history because they know about the land run. So a lot of what we do is talk about, no, let's back up and talk about Indian Territory versus Oklahoma Territory. So there's lots of education to do, and actually that's one of the best parts of my job.
Oh, wonderful. You sort of hit on all of the high points that I have always found important. Of course, the Trail of Tears, and the land run is being examined under new lenses these days, saying, hey, wait a minute, let's not forget the people whose land you're running over there. And
exactly. Yeah.
Of course, it brought to mind Will Rogers' comment, we didn't come over on Mayflower, but we were here to meet the boat.
Right.
And that sort of thing. And
what wisdom is in that quote? Yeah.
I know. And then, of course, you mentioned, the oil industry, which has had a mixed relationship with Native Americans. Now, is that stress, that importance, come across to your visitors there? Do they understand what we're looking at, and when we look to the past there?
Well, I think we still have a lot of education to do. So off the cuff, I would say the majority of our visitors, whether they be local, national, or international, for the most part, are pretty clueless. So again, we have a lot of work to do. So no is the short answer.
Yeah, I'd have to agree there. Even our governor got that one wrong, saying it was based on race rather than a political relationship.
Yeah. I think we're having to deal with what some call American exceptionalism, and we're having to re-examine what we were taught in our history classes and about who are the heroes. And I often say in any talks that I'm presenting is about most of history is really bad stuff. It's about somebody pounding on somebody else and taking their stuff. And you can just pick whatever point of history that you want to. And then we move into who got to write the story, who have we been listening to. And so just for centuries and centuries, it has been the white male victor perspective. And I think now we are on the cusp of a new age where we are providing more platforms for what have been known as marginalized communities to be able to tell their stories. And we're hearing them, whether it's writing of plays or songs, folk songs, poetry, art, et cetera, et cetera. So more and more people are telling their stories, and it's not just the white man's point of view.
Now, let's move on to our subject of the day, and of course the 5 moon statues
Yes.
on the lawn of the society there. A lot of people aren't familiar with the fact that Native Americans had a significant showing in the cultural arts, including the exotic world of ballet, and these 5 women had such a presence there, right? So tell me, you have 5 statues on your lawn. Let's look at them real quick.
Yes. Well, the first thing that I like to, or the first point that I really want to bring about is these amazing women, 5 Native Americans from different tribes, all from Oklahoma, who reached the pinnacle of international acclaim, each and every one of them. And one of the research materials that I was reading talked about how it is very logical that these Native American women hearkened back to the First Peoples tradition of dance and storytelling through dance. So I think that foundation certainly was there for the launch of the career on into classical ballet. So all of these women, as I said, from Oklahoma, they were contemporaries. They knew one another, but there was only one time that they all danced on the same stage, and that was for the 40th anniversary of the Tulsa Ballet. Now, these women collectively are called the 5 Moons, and they have been designated as Oklahoma treasures. If you travel to the state capitol in Oklahoma City, there's a beautiful mural of them in the dome of the Capitol. But again, they never all 5 danced together. There was an artist, sculptor, his name was Monty England, who had this vision of creating statues to honor these women. At the time, all 5 of them were alive, and they had a say in the role that was portrayed, the position, and the costumes when Monty began this project. And so he did all of the 5 maquettes, and then he began to ask around, where could we install these? And it was at this time that the Tulsa Historical Society and Museum was opening on our grounds, and so we were approached by Monty and the Tulsa Ballet. and we had wonderful donors in Charlie and Peggy Stevenson. She is Choctaw, I believe. And then also the Barnett family were very instrumental in gifts. And so that's how the statues came to be placed at the Tulsa Historical Society on our grounds.
Now let's review and share the quick identification of the five.
Sure.
Dancers.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to do them in order that they are placed on our grounds. The first is Moslyn Larkin, who of course started the Tulsa Ballet Company, and she was Shawnee. Next we have Yvonne Shoto, who started the Oklahoma City Ballet, the University of Oklahoma School of Dance, and I can't remember. I think, is she Creek? I can't remember. I'm sorry. My apologies.
No, was it possibly Osage?
No, she's not Osage. The two Tall Chiefs are. So the next one then is Marjorie Tall Chief, who is Osage, and she, of course, is well known for the New York City Ballet. And then we have Rosalind Hightower, who is Choctaw, and she started a dance company outside of Paris. And then, sadly, our next one, the fifth one, would be Marjorie Tall Chief, who sister of Maria Tall Chief, and Marjorie started the Chicago Ballet and also was instrumental in the Oklahoma City Ballet. And that's our statue, which was stolen a few weeks ago.
Now, when we heard that, I personally had several emotions run through my psyche here. First of all, I was shocked that anyone would do something that stupid. And then my next emotion was anger, absolute anger. Like, why? I mean, such an important cultural icon there was destroyed, and then find out later they'd cut it up for scrap to sell for the metal. Now, what was the reaction there at the society when you found out?
Well, much the same as yours. I got the call on a Saturday morning. I was at home. One of my staff persons called me after the theft had been discovered. And I, too, was angry with all of those questions about why and don't they understand. I mean, how could you take this icon, this symbol of Native American culture, blah, blah, blah. And at this time, we didn't know that the statue had been destroyed or cut up and taken to a recycling center. We didn't know that until Monday. So this is a Saturday morning that we first found out. We happen to have two persons from the Tulsa Police Department on our board, and so I immediately made a call to one of them and said, what can we do? You know, how much can we post? And he said, get it out on social media, and that they would also carry it through the Tulsa Police Department. And I really believe because of the news coverage, both on television, newspapers, etc., that we received immediately and also through social media, that the story then spread. And so on Monday morning, when our good friends at the recycling plant in Catoosa realized what they had, they immediately called the police, who then notified us. And so I immediately went to Catoosa to identify that, yes, these are pieces of our beloved statue. So that all happened pretty quickly. I now know a lot more about recycling plants. Number one, they are our friends, and they're about cleaning up the environment, and they have all of these policies and procedures in place. They go on and take the things, but they have security cameras. I mean, we have photographs of the person with the pieces at their feet. We have photographs of the thief with receiving the cash for it. And so those are all good things in how we can, identify what happened. And yes, I think it had to do strictly, it was a cash transaction. It was all about getting the money for the scrap metal. It was not a hate crime. I don't believe that that they really had an understanding of the statue that they were taking.
I understand there was quite a public outcry when the word spread.
Yes. So the staff, our board, were just so overwhelmed and so beautifully surprised at the love and care that immediately came in, and not only from Tulsans who considered themselves to be owners of this story, and it was a statue that belonged to the whole community. But I began to receive requests for interviews, and stories were run in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlanta Constitution, the LA Times, the London Times, USA Today. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And I'm from Little Rock. I even got we made the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, which is my hometown paper. So they didn't say I was from Little Rock, but anyway, I was certainly glad that the theft of this statue attained recognition. And really what it helped us do was to tell this story once again of these 5 amazing women and their accomplishments.
Yes, I've always been amazed at them. At one point in my career, I was going to hunt one of them down for an interview. But let's jump ahead now. Where are we now?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah.
What I told my board yesterday was that, those bad things, the actual theft, the fact that the statue was cut apart and taken to the recycling center, that is in our rearview mirror, that bad thing, because there are so many positives that are coming out of this. Number one, we get to tell the story again, and it is being heard and embraced by so many people. So right off the top, that's a really great thing. The second is that the sculptor, now the original sculptor, Monty England, died in the process. And so his mentor, a man named Gary Henson, who is also Native American, finished the project. And so that was the second call that I made, was to Gary Henson to let him know. And after we both sobbed uncontrollably, he takes a deep breath, and then he says, I can bring her back to life. I can do this. And still, when we didn't have all of the information, he called me and he said, even if she is too badly damaged, I can melt down those pieces and we can recast her. And I said, well, Gary, I thought that the molds had been destroyed in a fire at the foundry. He said, yes, I think so, but that's not a problem. I can still do it. And I said, what, you have sketches? And he says, no, it's in my mind. It's in my mind. So that's an area, I'm not an artist, so to have that memory, that understanding of what you have created, I think is another marvelous story. But his studio is at the Chelsea, Oklahoma Boys and Girls Club, and they serve predominantly Cherokee children. And these kids are going to, number one, get to learn the story, and number two, watch this come back to life. They'll be able to watch that whole process, and we can talk about resiliency once again, and how does that manifest itself, particularly in Native peoples. Think about that story that we can tell for the ages. And here is a contemporary example of how we can pull together and we can do something that's good for so many people. And I really look forward to that.
Now, let's look at that, and perhaps it might require you to speculate a bit, but any idea of when that statue will return to your lawn?
Yes. Monty not Monty, I keep saying that. Gary tells me that it will be 12 to 18 months, depending on how badly she was damaged. And I haven't talked to him this week because I wanted to give him some time to do some assessment, and then, we'll get a plan and figure out. But originally, the Tulsa Ballet played such an integral role in bringing the Five Moons to life, if you will. And so I happened to see the woman with whom we worked. Her name is Cheryl Forrest, and I saw her recently not too long after the incident, and I said, Cheryl, let's do something really big. I don't know what that is, but we have 12 to 18 months to plan. And she was so excited about that and immediately bought in. And again, I don't know what we're going to do, but it's going to be big and significant.
I think the Tulsa community will welcome such an event.
I think so too. Yeah.
All right, Ms. Place, we're going to have to wrap this up, but I guess a final question: are you going to enhance your security measures?
I'm so glad you asked that. I love to talk about that publicly. One of the very first calls that we received was from Helmrich and Payne from their security department. They're a big drilling rig company here in Tulsa. In fact, their offices are just not too far from the museum, and they called and they said, we want to help. We have already met with them to talk about what do you think, or what could we do. We also have an unnamed entity at this time who stepped up and said, this corporation said, we want to make sure that they are safe and secure. We're going to help you with this. And so all of this love and care and even funds to do this came in. We probably are going to be relocating the statues, pulling them closer into the museum. We're going to upgrade some lighting, but yes, security is paramount.
Oh, okay.
We've already enhanced to some degree.
All right,
from
maybe
what we had.
A couple of angry Indian dogs might help you there. Right.
Well, I'm not sure how that works. Maybe you'll have to help me with that one.
Oh, I'm sure we can. All right, Ms. Michelle Place with the Tulsa Historical Society, thank you for making time for me this morning and filling us in on the progress of the return of the fifth moon to your exhibits. Okay, Mado, we'll talk to you again, and I'd like to keep us informed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for contacting
We want to know when.
We'll keep you posted, absolutely.
Okay, Mado.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You too. All right, that was Michelle Place with the Tulsa Historical Society. She's filling us in on the restoration of the Marjorie Tallchief statue that was stolen and cut up for scrap, and that still angers me to even talk about it. We're going to take a short pause, and in our second segment here today, we have a piece from one of our newest reporters who's starting to work his way my way, which will be a wonderful thing. Braden Harper did an interview with a couple of wonderful Native people who are putting together a play looking at the history of one significant Mvskoke woman. So please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio. Okay, we're going to turn now to a piece that was put together by our new reporter, Brendan Harper, and talking about a new play looking at some Mvskoke history.
For those of you who are fans of theater, we have an exciting segment to share with you. This segment's topic is about a new play on Mvskoke history and activism. It's called On the Far End, and it's about Mvskoke Creek activist leader Ella Jean Chattery. The play recently had its first table reading just this past month. Chattery was an activist, author, and storyteller. She was born in 1937 in Okemah, Oklahoma. She was full-blood Mvskoke Creek as well as a Mvskoke citizen. Chattery lived a full life dedicated to the service of others. My personal favorite fact about Chattery is that she was a playwright with a sense of humor. On the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas, she wrote and produced a musical comedy titled Indians Discover Christopher Columbus. The play takes a satirical view on the historical figure and highlights the hospitality of Native Americans. This is why no one else other than the fiercely multi-talented Mary Catherine Nagle was the perfect choice to bring Chattery's story to life on stage. On the Far End is written and performed by Nagle. She is a Cherokee citizen, activist, lawyer, and playwright. She embodies many of the same qualities as the heroine in her play's story. This was a personal story to Nagle, as she is the daughter-in-law of Chattery. Her husband, Jonadab Chattery, works very closely with her to bring the story to life. I sat down with Mary Catherine Nagle and Jonadab Chattery recently to get a thorough insight on what it took to produce this story. Good morning. I am joined by the creative powerhouse behind this production, Jonadab Chattery and Mary Catherine Nagle. Good morning to both of you. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. And Mado for taking the time. Thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you for being here. It is truly an honor to talk to you about this production, the issues that it tackles in the story of Jane Hill Chattery. So let's dig right into this. What is this play about?
Go ahead.
Well, first off, I'm just very thankful that Mary Catherine, who, as most of your listeners probably know, is an accomplished attorney, having filed numerous briefs before the Supreme Court, and an accomplished professional playwright. I'm very thankful and honored that Mary Catherine was willing to take on a mom's life story as the subject matter for her next play. And so the play is about my mom, Alla Jean Hill, who it's especially fitting to be talking to you about this play the day after Mother's Day. My mom passed away 25 years ago this year, and she was a full-blood Mvskoke Creek, raised in Okemah, Oklahoma, on the family allotment. But in a story that probably resonates for most Creeks, our family allotment wasn't technically our blood family's allotment. We had lost that through deception and coercion years and years ago. Instead, my mother grew up on the allotment of James Scott, who was a clan uncle to the family. And James Scott was well over 100 years old when he passed away. And Mom learned quite a bit from him. So she was grounded, and he was actually on the trail. And that's part of the roots of the community that not just our family, but lots of families in the Okemah area drew from. And Mom grew up kind of playing on his knee, and even though she was tied to her community, she led a life outside of Creek Nation after marrying my father, and she lived in South Dakota, Florida, Arizona. So the play that MK has written is about my mom, but it uses my mom's life to tell a very universal Native story that encapsulates all sorts of policy developments of the 20th century, and including the boarding school experience, including fighting for tribal sovereignty. And she uses the McGirt decision to kind of frame the whole story itself. So I'm very thankful for Mary Catherine taking on this important work, and just honored, just on a very personal level, that she was willing to do that. It's a very personal and universal play at the same time.
Yeah, so the play had its first table reading recently, a few weeks back. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, so it was actually a staged reading, which in theater terms just means it's not a full production, but a staged reading means there's rehearsal, it's workshopped, and there's an audience. And so what we were able to do is I was able to make changes to the play during the process after hearing it out loud, and then we had an audience for 2 performances. And that really gives you a chance to listen to the audience, feel the audience's energy. When are they laughing? When are they crying? When are they gasping? When are they maybe getting a little bit like bored or distracted if a certain part of the play is kind of going on for too long. And so it's really a really incredible opportunity to workshop your play. And so that's what we were doing. And this workshop was directed by Lori Woolery, and the actress was Delana Studi, who's just a phenomenal actress. And it was really an incredible opportunity to fine-tune the play and make some, I think, pretty great changes. And it's still a work in progress, but I do think the play advanced quite a bit. And we were really honored to have in the audience a lot of our, fellow Mvskoke, including tribal leadership. Councilwoman Joyce Deere was in the audience. We also had traditional ceremonial leadership. Miko Chavon Cornwall was there. Colonel, sorry. Chavon Colonel was there. And, several other distinguished Mvskoke citizens, including Shara Giles, who's president of the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. And am I forgetting?
Sarah Colonel.
Yes, Sarah Colonel.
Yeah.
Anyone else from...
the whole family from Oklahoma and Arizona. We had family from Oklahoma and Arizona coming in. We had tribal leadership from other tribal nations here, from Fort Belknap, from Montana nations, Oklahoma nations, and so it was. And we also had numerous federal officials come, and so having the play in DC is not only great for exposure. General exposure of the message of the story. It's also great for advocacy. So Roundhouse Theater's, kind of big deal theater in the D.C. area, and we're very proud of the fact that the play is having, that reach throughout the theater community. But having federal officials there kind of understand how deeply personal these policy battles are. Right now, Creek Nation's in almost an existential battle to try to protect and implement the historic McGirt decision. Having federal officials there understand that these stories aren't just about abstract notions of law and sovereignty. They speak to the heart of our experience as Native people. It's very, very powerful because, the decision makers are based in D.C., at least from the federal level. And that's what MK's play does. She frames this story of McGirt in a context that includes generations beyond, outside of my family, generations and generations of Mvskoke. And she talks about how there can be no present without the sacrifices of our ancestors. And so the McGirt decision is a very powerful example of that because, I rather have the storyteller in the room kind of frame this, but she tells how we got to this point, at least from one family's perspective, and our family is just one of all the Mvskoke families that led to our survival today. A little side note, Mom was a storyteller. Mom wrote plays, and Mom passed away before ever getting a chance to meet Mary Catherine. But MK has really done justice to Creek Nation, but also the family by telling this story. But I think MK and Mom would have had a great conversation about storytelling, the power of storytelling, and the power of storytelling when it comes to advocating for our rights as Native people. So I don't know if you want to tell a little bit about what's in the story to kind of frame it. I know we did before I, asked. Okay, so go ahead.
Oh, sure. So in terms of her life story, it covers her life, and her life was pretty amazing. Everything she survived, everything she fought for, everything she achieved. So the play highlights her survival through boarding school. She ran away 8 times, which is pretty incredible, from the Eufaula Indian boarding school where she was beaten and chased by dogs every time she ran away until the 8th time when she was successful. It deals with language preservation, even though it doesn't discuss it directly. She's a first language Mvskoke speaker. Deals with issues related to death and disease and the fact that even still to this day, right, our Native people don't get the medical care they deserve under the law or that we're entitled to. She died a very early death from very treatable diseases that had they been properly diagnosed and treated, she'd probably still be here with us today, or at least would have at least had a couple more decades. Deals with all of her advocacy. She fought to regain the right for Mvskoke Creek Nation to elect its own leadership in the 60s and early 70s, which is really incredible when you think about the fact that the United States got the idea for democracy from tribal nations like Mvskoke Creek Nation, Cherokee Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and then took that right away, and that tribal nations like Creek Nation had to fight to restore that, and her family, with many other families, was involved in that fight, and she led the fight in Phoenix to save the Phoenix Indian boarding school. I mean, her life is full of, we could talk for hours and hours, and the play right now is about 2 hours, and I've got to trim some of it, about all the fights that she led, the plays that she wrote, but it's also deeply personal, and it talks about her life journey marrying outside of Creek Nation. She was the first in her entire family. None of her parents, uncles, aunties, grandparents, siblings, cousins, no one had married outside of Creek Nation, and she married a South Asian Indian man who was Bengali in the 50s in Oklahoma. So when biracial marriages were not accepted or practiced really routinely. So, her own personal journey in terms of marrying outside of Creek Nation, trying for many years unsuccessfully to have a child until finally she did, and being a mother. And I think the struggles that she had are just very real in terms of balancing her incredibly hard work as an activist with being a mother and raising her children and being a wife and being a daughter and being a sister and auntie and all these things that we are as women in our lives. She did it all. And, so it's a very personal story, like John and I've mentioned. It's also very universal in its themes and hopefully very moving, which I think based on the audience's reactions from this last weekend, it really was.
And if I could add, it's also a very honest story. And so Mary Catherine has approached this story with professionalism, but also with a very kind of respectful eye towards, how to really kind of talk about some of the challenges that Mom had. And as a family, we've kind of talked internally about whether or not the family is comfortable with certain aspects of Mom's life being in the play. So there are scenes, significant scenes. I don't want to spoil the whole play because I want people to kind of see it in person, but there are scenes where Mom is struggling with carrying the emotional weight that many natives, I think, can relate to, of really kind of internalizing the generational trauma that she's trying to kind of process so that she can live a purposeful life. The play talks about that, both in terms of the weight that brings on somebody's mental psyche, but also spiritual psyche, physical psyche, and just the weight that kind of bears down on many natives who really kind of start thinking about who they are within the context of the generations that came before them. So the play doesn't shy away from those challenges, but Mom comes out the other side. She has some very difficult times, but at the end, she knows who she is within that context. And though her life was cut short, and she should have been afforded the opportunity to do many, many more things, you get to see Mom's kind of journey as she kind of faces those challenges. And that journey is what I hope people can take away and relate from the play and relate to. When we talked about this play, the hope was that the play would provide a roadmap for younger natives who also have their own struggles in their lives, trying to figure out how to live a life of purpose, how to live maybe a life of activism or advocacy, while at the same time being true to their roots. And Mom's life is one of many roadmaps that I think people can gain from. So MK's play is very honest, in addition to being, historical. And it's very personal.
Indeed. So let's just kind of start wrapping things up a bit. I I know that this play won't have its theatrical debut until next year. However, could you guys just tell me, kind of when and where audiences can expect to see this play debut, as well as what the process is going to look like from here moving forward?
Sure. So the debut, we don't have an exact date, but it'll be sometime in April of 2023. So the theater will tell us sometime soon when, quote, opening night is, and there'll be some previews and then opening night, and it'll run through sometime in May 2023, and that should be announced soon. It's at the Roundhouse Theater in Bethesda, Maryland. So if you just watch the theater's website, usually tickets will go on sale sometime in the fall, probably. So there's plenty of time to purchase tickets and plan travel to see the play. Like I said, it'll be April 2023. But right now what we're doing is we're casting. So we'll be asking Native actresses to submit audition tapes. And we're also looking to hire a Native costume designer. And we're looking to hire a Native lighting designer and hiring other designers as well, and a Mvskoke cultural consultant who will help us. There is Mvskoke language in the play and aspects of Mvskoke culture. Since I'm the playwright and I'm not Mvskoke, just want to make sure we have someone whose job it is to ensure that the play is authentically portraying those aspects of Mvskoke culture, and that person's actually compensated and not just donating their time for the production. And so right now we're really in this phase where we're just kind of bringing all the creativity on board and hiring all the artists that will be involved in the production. We'll start rehearsals in February of 2023. So, I have until then to do some more rewrites, and I can actually still do rewrites during the rehearsal process if I decide to, but really the main part of what we're doing right now is bringing the other creative artists on board who will be working with us through this process.
When you say we, she's not talking about we, she's talking about she in the theater. Basically my role is just adoring admirer of MK's work, and I'm definitely not compensated, and I have no creative role in any of this. So, last little tie-in. This week, the week of the professional reading was a really important week for Creek Nation, and I'm actually thinking of writing a little piece on this. You had the reading of Mom's play. You also had the commencement ceremony for Joy Harjo in her work as the National Poet Laureate. But we also had a Supreme Court case argued that was related to McGirt in the Castro Huerta case. So Creek Nation's leadership was also in town for that on Wednesday. And that case, of course, is argued in the same chambers that the Supreme Court's held argument in since that building was built. Again, I don't want to go into too many details of the play, but when we talk about Mom kind of dealing with her own challenges, a lot of people know Mom because of the important work that she did. They know that Mom won the National Jefferson Medal for Public Service. They know that she helped create, one of the first urban Indian health centers in Tucson. They know her work, telling incredible stories, but they don't know about the struggle that went into that, and that's what this play does. One of the circles that MK connects in all of this is connecting the award ceremony for the Jefferson Award, which was held in the Supreme Court, to the prayers from our ancestors and the prayers and all the work that goes into any of our victories. And she ties that scene in with all of our battles before the Supreme Court, including the McGirt decision. It's a beautiful piece of artistry, and that's why I'm always amazed at MK's ability to kind of draw these parallels. But I wanted to make that point about the significance of this last week and everything that went on in terms of Creek Nation's work to protect our future, and all of it taking place in the 25th anniversary year of Mom's death. There's a lot of tie-ins there. Mm-hmm. I found it very powerful. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And I will just say, too, it's also just, I think not only is it really inspirational to see a play about, just Mvskoke people, seeing the diversity, seeing our culture, It's also really inspiring to see both of you just come together and just put on this production. I know there's so much that goes on in terms of producing, a play or a film or anything on this scale that requires so many moving pieces. And I just think that it's just so wonderful that we are able to see Native Americans as well as Muskogee people just be seen, be heard, and just doing some really wonderful things. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all Muskogee media for being willing to, kind of follow this story. We'll keep you posted as the full production grows nearer, but just thank you for all the work you do to share information within our nation and keep us connected and keep us talking. Mado, Braden.
Mado.
Okay, we want to thank, Brandon excuse me there. Brandon Harper for that piece, and Jared Moore for sharing it from our video section. We've got a little bit of information to share, so we'll get around to doing that, but we'll take a short pause. Okay, now everyone is welcoming the return of the Creek Festival, and we're going to try and keep you updated on information about the event as it becomes available. Excuse me. First of all, we'll remind you that it is June the 23rd and 25th over on the festival grounds here on the Muskogee Nation, and so we're able to be there live. Our plan is to broadcast live there on Friday morning for a couple of hours from 10 till 12. So drop by and say hello and catch us in action, so to speak. Some of the information we've been getting, due to the wonderful work of our reporters, including Morgan and Taylor, they're trying to find ways to honor the loved ones that Muskogee Nation has lost during the course of the pandemic. And the plan is from the committee is to find a way to honor those folks and to unite us and make sure that we will memorialize them. Those who have attended before might remember the social stomp dance that takes place the Thursday evening before the festival weekend that has been led by Miko David Proctor. And now he unfortunately passed away in May of last year. And so our organizers there were working hard to find someone who could fill in and share this so important cultural event. Now, according to those folks, they have found someone, but they're not ready to announce yet. And just in case there might be some last-minute changes, just like in live radio. So they're working to, what will we say, kind of nail down the contracts for entertainers. And they've got talks in place, but aren't ready to share the final ideas about who those folks will be for this particular festival. It's kind of a last-minute thing, and I imagine they're having quite a challenge in finding someone who might be available. Of course, the event also will kick off with a Miss Muskogee Nation Scholarship Pageant on June 4th. And other activities include the Living Legends ceremony, the All-Indian Rodeo, a parade, carnival rides, various sports tournaments, including those for our young people, cultural exhibitions, arts and crafts, food vendors, and there'll be more announcements to come, plus the display of services available through the Mvskoke Nation. So, if you're traveling particularly from all around the country, welcome back. It's nice to have this thing returned to us. Mvskoke Media will continue to report on the festival updates as they become available. So stick with us, read the paper, watch the TV, video presentations, and of course tune in to Mvskoke Radio. We also want to remind you that the archives for Mvskoke Radio is available. If you're interested in hearing past programs, you can check out our website on YouTube, Mvskoke Radio on YouTube, and fiddle around with some of those possibilities. And you can maybe listen to a program that was a favorite or something that you want to learn. Okay, here's a cautionary thing. If it is, it's festival time, and if you need your business cards or brochures or flyers or car magnets and banners, you want to get a hold of Mvskoke Creative, wonderful folks there. But you better order before June the 17th at 5 p.m. And festival orders will not be taken after the 17th. And, of course, they don't offer shipping. You'll have to come pick your stuff up. So contact them for quotes, 918-732-7720. And find them on mvskokemedia.com. It's a print and design shop, digital, and they're wonderful people there, and I love working with them. Okay, finally, we'll remind you, of course, the Living Legends ceremony is the 23rd at River Spirit. If you have a wonderful Mvskoke citizen who'd you like to honor, you want to get a hold of, where am I here? Anita Daney at mvskokenation.com, 918-732-7605. Okay, that's about all I can do with it. We'll catch you all later. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. But